Hello and welcome to another edition of Veterans Corner. I'm Marshall Preston, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel retired, and your host for today's segment. Our Veterans Corner is an initiative of your Westboro Veterans Advisory Board and graciously produced by our partners here at Westboro Television. The goal of Veterans Corner is to share information on topical issues that may affect our veterans, their families, our residents, and friends within the community. It's also an opportunity to spotlight our local veterans, where we seek to share some of their experiences and stories to highlight their service and continued civic contributions to the community at large. And by doing so, we hope to educate the community of the variety and breadth of experiences that our veterans have, and perhaps break down some of the assumptions, biases, or stereotypes that we may hold on to. To that end, we're quite fortunate to have Andy Toorock with us today, who was our Veteran of the Year for 2020. And I'm looking forward to the conversation ahead. Andy, thank you for joining us today. Congratulations for that award. Sorry that it's taken us so long to get out of the COVID and back you into the studio.
Well, that's fine. Thank you.
So if you don't mind, I'll let you introduce yourself and give us a little background. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, where I was raised for 18 years. I went to high school there, played 3 sports, and went on to college, Dartmouth College, where I played football and joined the Marine Corps. I signed up for the PLC program, which is platoon leaders class. You go get your boot camp for 12 weeks, and when you graduate from college, you get your commission. And then I was sent to Quantico, Virginia to go to basic school for 32 weeks.
And when did you graduate? How was the PLC a common pursuit at Dartmouth?
I graduated in 1958, and back then it wasn't a common pursuit, but the graduating class, which is unbelievable, ended up with 30 people joining the Marine Corps.
Wow.
Some through ROTC, Navy ROTC, and some with PLC.
Okay. And what was it about the Marine Corps and that opportunity that you said yes to?
I felt that I was very fortunate living in this country, and I felt that I had a duty that I had to serve. And I picked the Marine Corps because it was the toughest and the best. Sorry to have to tell you that. And that's the reason I chose it.
Okay. And did you have any family members that
No.
had served prior?
No, my father was too young in World War II and then too old after that. But I was fortunate, and I have to owe this to my parents, that they had me when they did, because I was too young for Korea, and I was out of before Vietnam. So I did my time with no combat, except I was in one battle. And I was stationed in Southern California, and the battle in those days was to get in the Pacific Coast Highway, because it was not easy. They go 60 miles an hour, almost bumper to bumper.
Goodness gracious. Okay. Well, let's go back to you did the PLC. Was that a summer program during one of your years at Dartmouth?
Yes.
And which summer was it, and where was it? Paris Island?
No, it was at Quantico.
Quantico, sorry.
I signed up late, so I had to do all 12 weeks at once. If you signed up when you were a sophomore, you did 6 and 6. So first 6 weeks is gone, and everybody's packing their sea bag and going home, except another fellow and myself. And I said, oh my God, this is terrible. And then the next group came in to do their second 6 weeks. After a year back in college, drinking, smoking, whatever, and they were not in good shape. And the first day we had to run around the grinder. And I hate to tell you how many threw up, how many fell down. So I sort of laughed to myself, I did the right thing.
Okay. Any traumatic experiences with fresh haircuts or a good drill sergeant welcoming you to the basic school?
Well, the first thing they did when you get there was shave your hair off, because they want everybody to be equal, and they want you to be down to nothing so they can put you in the shape they want. And boy, it was an interesting 12 weeks.
Is there any particular drill sergeant or instructor from basic school that sticks out in your mind? Whether or not you remember their name or anymore?
No, I don't. Our drill instructor at boot camp had a reputation of marching prisoners off the mountains when he was in Korea.
Okay.
So Sergeant Billets, and I will never forget him. It was very interesting. I guess one of the things that happened was we had a gentleman in our platoon who, typical of what you would see in the movies, couldn't climb up the wall, couldn't swing on it, jump over the water, he'd fall in the water. His name was David Roth. So he never should have been there. I mean, whoever let him go in was a mistake. So one day the sergeant calls us together, we're going to have a little meeting. People are saying I'm anti-Semitic because I washed Roth out. And then he said, Toorock is Jewish, and he's number 2 in the platoon. So if I was anti-Semitic, he wouldn't be number 2. And at that point, I was told by some friends that had gone through the course before, make sure they don't know who you are. If your DI doesn't know your name, you're in good shape. And I had kept it at that point. Nobody knew anything about me, except where I went to school. And when he called for that meeting, But it was a great experience. It molded me into, I guess, what I'm today and what I do.
Okay. And then you went back to Dartmouth, finished your senior year, and then commissioned? Yeah. Okay. What did you get your degree in?
History.
And what did that enable you to do as a Marine Corps officer?
Nothing.
So what did they ask you to do? Every Marine is a rifleman.
Right. I was a combat engineer, and one day I had a very serious problem. I did it wrong, and I lost one of my fingers. So that's the only real experience I've had.
Okay.
No combat, charge of the utility section.
Okay. And where were you stationed out in Southern California?
El Toro, Marine Corps Air Base. It was in Santa Ana, California.
And what was the commitment for signing up for PLC?
3 years.
Okay.
And fortunately, I lived in Laguna Beach with a couple of pilots. As everybody must know, every pilot's an officer. And they had a lot of officers, so they let you live off the base and pay what you have to pay for rent. So that worked out. Laguna was a lovely place.
Well, good. And did any of your pilot friends offer you a ride?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
One of my roommates was a captain. I was a first lieutenant, and you have to earn flight pay. If you're in an operating squadron, you get the hours. But he wasn't in one, so he has to make up his hours for flight pay. So one afternoon, he said, let's go up to San Francisco, have dinner, and we'll come back. I'll get some time. I said, okay. And I had qualified before that to ride in a plane because I went through the ejection process. So he's a captain, I'm a first lieutenant, and we're flying, and he says, Lieutenant, you're going to fly this bird. I said, no, I'm not. He said, I'm a captain, and you're a first lieutenant. You're going to fly this bird. I'm sorry, sir, I'm not doing it. I don't know how. He said, see that stick in front of you? If it starts to wobble, that means I let go of the stick. And if you don't take it and fly this, we're going to crash. So naturally, I took this thing. And it was the most amazing experience that I think that I've had in my life, outside of my kids and my wife.
That's when you decided that you should have been in the Air Force?
No, no. But it was, just to look up, and all I had to do was hold that stick, pull back if I wanted to go up a little. It was just a great experience.
Do you recall the type of aircraft?
No, I don't. It was one of those jets that they use for training, 2-seater. You're in the back, and the pilot's in the front.
Fantastic. Pretty good dinner, pretty good flight home.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I guess I was lucky in a sense because I had another friend, not a roommate, who asked me to go with him. He was going to get some hours. He was going to El Paso. And I had a pretty heavy date that night, and I couldn't go. And the next morning when he took off to come back, he crashed and was killed. Apparently the mountains right at the end, you have to really get the stick back to get up, and he didn't make it. So I think about that a lot.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I wouldn't have my wonderful wife or my wonderful grandchildren or my kids. Just,
Yep.
I'm here.
No, and sadly a reminder that you know, there's risk embedded in a lot of military careers and
Oh my
and
God,
duties.
One of the other roommates, he was a pilot, and I guess he had a flame out, and he was over big civilian area, and he stayed and rode it out and crashed, and he died. It's the day I reported in there, someone was killed, and the day I was separated, someone else killed. It's a tough job,
Yep.
and no matter what you do in the military.
Well, thank you for serving, and thank you to the brave men and women that have done it you know, continuously. Let's go back to, so a combat engineer. Tell me a little bit about your unit, your superiors. Did you have any senior non-commissioned officers that coached you
it
along?
was very interesting because after basic school, I'm sent to El Toro. And I report in, and I'm taking over an engineering utility section. And the Marine that's running it, Sergeant Gunner Cox, 13 years in the Marine Corps. And here comes Lieutenant Toorock, who knew nothing about what he was supposed to do. But we got along. I just told him that I know nothing, you know everything, you just keep running and we'll talk about what we do.
Okay.
And it worked out very well, very well.
Yep, the officers end up sort of doing management and leadership and people issues.
Yeah.
Do you remember any particular challenges from any of your personnel?
Just one, and he was, I don't know if he should have been a Marine or not, but he was. And he was in the brig one time, and I went and visited him. When he gets out, we're back at where our headquarters were, and somebody pulls up, and it's funny how I remember, they pulled up in a Volkswagen, and he got out of the car and left two kids in the Volkswagen. And I was standing out front of our Quonset hut, and a car caught on fire. And this kid, without hesitation, ran to the car, got the door open, and got the kids out. So you never know what someone's going to do.
Correct.
Something gets you to go out and do. It's like the Medal of Honor.
Yep.
I always wondered what you did in your mind to earn it. And one day at a Marine Corps birthday in Boston, I'm standing there and I turn around to my left and there's a man standing there with that blue ribbon with stars on it around his neck. I said, oh my God. So I introduced myself, we shook hands. And I asked him what he did to earn the medal. He looked at me and said, I did what any other Marine would do. And that was it. And that was another thrill of my life, not like flying or some other things, but that was really something. Outside of that, I go to the Marine Corps birthday every year. They have it here in Boston. The biggest one anywhere. Last year there were 2,000 Marines. And it's very interesting because the kid that started it from South Boston wanted to go to fight in Vietnam, and 3 of them went, and 2 of them came back, and they were having lunch, and they decided they should have lunch together every Marine Corps birthday. And that built from the 2 guys into the last 3 years, there have been over 2,000 people there. And the guy that started it, unbelievable, I don't know how he built it up, but the story is he could be walking down the street in Boston with the Commandant of the Marine Corps in his dress blues, with all his fruit salad, and the people would say, who's that with Tommy? Because he can do anything now as far as Marine Corps. He has just done a wonderful job. And Marine Corps is sort of special to me, and I think it's special because of what they put you through in boot camp. That's the start. That's what gets you going. And a lot of people go for the uniform, but that's nice, but not important.
No, it's a one. I think military training does a wonderful job equalizing and creating teams and
Oh, yeah.
finding connections where there may not be. So it sounds like you enjoyed your time and are proud of your service.
Yes, I did.
So why separate and what did you do next?
It would not be a career for me because I don't think in those days you earned a promotion because you did something outstanding. You were on a list, and each time so until the list got to you, there was no advancement. I did go from second lieutenant to first lieutenant, but that's automatic. Once you're in a year and a half, you get promoted. They figured you learned something in that time.
Well, congratulations, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
So did you know what you wanted to do next?
I had no idea. As I said to my kids when they were growing up and didn't know what they wanted to do, I was 41 before I found out what I wanted to do. I came up to see my roommate when I got home to Boston, and I bumped into somebody I knew from the past that had started a business, and he asked me if I needed a job, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I said yes. So I took that, and after a couple of years, I was vice president of operations for a company that had leased departments in discount stores. And from there, I went to Fannie Farmer Candy, which was as people say, a sweet job. And I was executive vice president of operations there, which was interesting. And then one day, they fired the president. We turned the company around for about 3 years, and they fired the president. So I knew I was gone. A new man comes in, he wants his people. So I was fired, and I started my own business, which, thank God they fired me. It was one of the best things that happened to me. And I owned a sales agency. And the area was unbelievable. You had roughly 27 accounts to call on, because it was health and beauty aids, drugs, cosmetics, and a lot, drugstores, every place, all over. Now, there are about 3 accounts. Walmart put every discounter out of business, except Target and who's one other one. The other one, Kohl's from Milwaukee. So it was just a good time.
Okay. So you got back to the greater Boston area early 60s.
Yes.
When did you make it out to Boston or to Westboro?
We lived in Framingham actually, I moved to Framingham in 1938.
Okay.
I was 2 years old. So we ended up in Framingham.
Yeah, hang on. I thought you had said you were born and raised in New York.
Yes. We moved here in 38
Okay. And
and moved back to Brooklyn in 40. So I still raised there. But we wanted to find a place, condominium, over 50. And Framingham wouldn't let it, for some reason, they wouldn't let it happen. And that's stupid, because these over 50 places get no services. We pay for our own trash. Police come, they come up to look once in a while. We do have service from the fire department, just in case there's a fire. So we've been here 20 years, and I'm very happy we moved here. It's great when you get older. I'm fairly old. When there's a crowd, there's people there. We have roughly 13 widows living there, and it's a good place. They have a lot of people back them. So it's nice. I like it. I like this place.
Certainly home at this point.
Oh God, yes, I love it here.
And I've known you for a couple of years now, and know that you still have some good, strong ties throughout all of your communities, to include Framingham.
Yes.
So you're an excellent networker, and keep your ties going. What was it about the Marine Corps that kept you tied to Marine Corps activities? Or perhaps phrased differently, did you ever have a break from I left the service, found a new job,
Yes.
left it, aside for a while.
I didn't go into the reserve because I didn't know where I was going to live. And then when I came up here, I decided not to. And then bumped into a couple old roommates who were in the Marine Corps. And I decided, that's crazy. They instilled in me that once a Marine, always a Marine. There's no such thing as a former Marine or an ex-Marine, which I hear all the time. It doesn't matter. So I started going to the birthdays, and that's when I got hooked back again.
And I've been doing it ever since?
Ever since. Haven't missed a birth. The guy who runs it, he knows me, doesn't know my name. He knows who I am, and he calls me Hoodie. And he calls me Hoodie because every year at this birthday, you get a sweatshirt. And after about 7 years, I said to him, why don't you give a hoodie? Change it. People like something different. So he did. So he calls me Hoodie when he sees me.
Okay. And you are you're a proud member of the Westboro Veterans Advisory Board, along
Yes.
with me. I had the good fortune of meeting you at Captain Haskell's memorial, which you
Absolutely.
helped organize. Can you tell us a little bit about Captain Haskell?
Oh, God, yes. Captain Haskell was killed in the Beirut barracks bombing. I guess it was 50 years ago. And there was a plaque, I didn't know about it, celebrating his name. And at the Marine Corps birthday, the head of the Marine Corps, Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, what the heck's it called? The Marine Corps League, the Marine Corps League. And he said after he's going to Framingham State because they're dedicating a room for veterans there in Haskell's name. So I said, well, I got to find that plaque. I couldn't find it. It's in front of the Forbes building. I could not find it. So I asked somebody where it was, and they told me, and I couldn't find it because it was fall. It was covered with leaves. And I imagine in the winter it's covered with snow. So I said, we've got to get that on a pedestal. Took about a year and a half, but we finally have it. There's a nice pedestal in front of the Forbes building.
Yeah, right by the flagpole.
Yeah, and he was quite a guy. What's his name? Sullivan, who used to be President Trump's, one of his advisors, went to basic school with Michael Haskell, and he says that if it wasn't for Michael, what he learned from him, he never would have made it to general. And he loved Michael. They were really close.
Yep.
But that's part of being in the service. You know you're going to be killed.
Yep. And he's a native Westboroan.
Yeah, he
which
went
is
to
why
high
the plaque
school
is
here.
here.
He went to Framingham State and then went back in the Marine Corps. And he was a DI, which tells you something about him because you don't become a DI unless you've got a lot on the ball and you have to go to school to get the training how to treat us boots to scare the hell out of us.
And DI for our audience is drill instructors, so the folks that are crisp and in your face to motivate you to become a better Marine and better person.
Very well put. I couldn't have said that anyway.
Throughout your time with the town and the Veterans Advisory Board, what are some of your proud accomplishments of the town and the board?
The most important one to me is the Quilt of Valor. And I say that because it is so important to the people that get it. We gave it to, at the time I started that was maybe 5-6 years ago. We had 12 World War II veterans. So naturally, they were
Focused
old.
on them, yep.
And I don't know what kind of life they had, 90, 96, whatever. And we did 12 separate times. And every one but 2 of them cried when they got that quilt. And I realized that this is important. And a lot of guys on the board think this is the best thing we've ever done. Now, how did it get to Westboro? One day my phone rings, And I had a sense it was important. I usually don't pick them up, but I picked it up. And I hear this woman's voice say, "Andy." I said, "Yes." She said, "My father's having his 100th birthday." And he was a World War II veteran. He was a bombardier. After he flew his 25 missions, he re-upped for another 25. He flew 50 missions over France and Germany. Well, she said, I said to her, "I'll be glad to go." It happened to be my favorite restaurant in Worcester. Get there, and I'm looking around. Who's this guy? I don't see anybody that looked 100. So during this program, this woman presents him with a quilt of valor. And I say, wow, this would be something that would be great for us. So I said, is there any way that we could do it in Westboro? She said, absolutely. All you have to do is get me a person's name and branch of service, and we'll have the quilt laid up. And she goes everywhere, but lately she's been too busy with something, so I present them most of the time. And as a matter of fact, this young man over here sitting to my right is going to receive a quilt the 19th of September at the Senior Center. And it's supposed, I'll tell you what happened, because you won't hear it otherwise. This woman had a vision of her son in Afghanistan, and it was terrible. He looked horrible. She was so upset. And then she had another vision, and he was wonderful. He was terrific. What was the difference? He had a quilt wrapped around him. Mm-hmm. So she says to herself, that's what makes the difference. So she had 3 quilts laid up, went to Walter Reed Hospital, gave them to the chaplain. He wasn't too thrilled about it. He didn't know if he could do it, but he does. The next day he calls her and says, how many and how fast can you get them? And that's what started the Quilt of Valor. To date, we've given out 393,000 quilts. There's an organization in every state, and she runs Massachusetts. And I guess the one that really got me was this guy is 100 years old. And we're going to do it at his daughter's house. And he pulls up, and gets out of a van in a wheelchair. So I'm saying to myself, I wonder if he will understand. I didn't know if he had it or not upstairs. And I hear his daughter say to him, Andy's a Marine. And the first thing he said was, Sept Phi. So I knew he had it upstairs. And what it made it so interesting and exciting for me, his daughter was there, his granddaughter was there, and his great-granddaughter was there. And that is something. It really, so that's what, to me, was the best thing. Next to that, I'd have to say Captain Haskell. That was very important to me. Yeah. And I'm glad I did it for lots of reasons. One of, I'm there, the service is over, and I see this handsome young guy in an Air Force uniform with all types of ribbons. And I said, gee, I'll bet he would be a good member of the Veterans Advisory Board. And he is the best, actually. So that's where I stand with it. We do a lot of things, the parades, collecting clothes for the homeless veterans. And a lot of people, when we do that, don't understand that there are a lot of female homeless veterans. So we do take clothes for women. And we do a big job. The Veterans Advisory Board is an exceptional organization. But I'm going to give a plug for them right now, because I think I've been in 10 years, and one of the big problems we have is we can't get younger people. And supposedly there are 535 veterans in town, and it's very difficult to get them to communicate, to come in and do something. We're having a breakfast, as a matter of fact, tomorrow, a free breakfast for veterans.
I think it's next weekend, the 14th.
Yes.
Okay.
What's today's date?
Today is the 6th.
Oh, I'm looking at my wrong calendar. And I was at the Senior Center, and they tell me we have 17 people registered. And the only time we get anybody is when it's free. That's a nice word when they hear it. So we're trying to get people to join.
Oh, but I wouldn't say that I'm young, but in some regards I'm younger. And I recognize that life moves pretty fast.
Yes.
So trying to grab their attention and
tough.
find sweet times. I'll also give a plug to the American Legion that
Yeah.
they support and sponsor that particular
Right.
breakfast. The VFW is also present in town. They've struggled ever since their post was damaged, but I know that there are efforts underway to try and rejuvenate and
Yes.
give some kind of mechanism. But between the board, the Legion, the VFW, our Veterans Support Officer, Jeff Farrell in town, and then frankly support from the community at large, it's like you, I go, this is a very supportive town to those efforts.
Definitely.
You've seen us put up the Hometown Heroes banners. As another, I think, step in recognition and outreach to all of those. We've done the food drives, supporting the pantry. I heard a statistic actually just last night that the food pantry, we now have 619 families in Westboro that take advantage of that program. The part that really surprised me was that prior to COVID, in 2019, there were only 189 families. So there is a significant need. Anyone that can support
Inflation.
and donate, lots of reasons.
Yes.
So,
Yes, there are.
all right. Is there any story that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. There's one I may tell my involvement with Dartmouth football,
Okay.
and it's just I got involved because I went to a meeting. The head coach travels around before to the big cities to let people know what's going on with the football team. And at Dartmouth, because of what happened back in the day with the date rape, you cannot have hard liquor at any function, beer and wine only. So I go down the steps to this restaurant, and there's a man standing there, and he says, and I didn't know who he was, and he said, "I'm Buddy Stevens, the coach." And the first thing I said to him was, "You're doing a lousy job." I said, "I have friends that went to Harvard. We haven't beaten Harvard in 10 years, and I take a lot of crap from them because of it." So he starts to speak afterwards, and I'm looking at this man, and I couldn't figure out what it was, but there's something about him. You're going to have to forgive me, because whenever I think of him, I start to cry. Because I looked at him, there's something special about him. The way his body language, the way he talked. So afterwards, anybody wanted to say anything, and I said, "I just want to tell you something, Coach. If I had a son that played football, I'd want you to be the coach." So he comes back next year, talks again, and I complimented him on a few things. I guess I gave him the biggest compliment he's ever received, because I said to him that he's the best thing that happened to Dartmouth football since Coach Blackman came to Hanover, which was in my time, and he turned the program around. Dartmouth under him won the Lambert Trophy, which is unbelievable because that's for the best team in the East, and that included Penn State, BC, all the college. So the next time I saw him was at a football game. We were playing Holy Cross, and I went over where the team comes out. He comes down, and he sees me, and he comes over to shake my hand, and we hugged, and that started something because I go to a lot of games. My daughters and I go up to Hanover, and I'm always waiting for the team to come out, and we hug. And every time we've hugged but once, we've won the game. And they were big games. There was Harvard twice. Once with a Hail Mary pass, once with a guy kicked a field goal and beat him with 2 seconds left. So we started this get together. And when we go up to Hanover, he is set up. They have a place, because it gets cold in Hanover in the fall. He has a place where people come in and sit and watch the game from inside. So he told me that my name's on the list if I can come in. So we walk up, and there are 2 big leather chairs at the 50-yard line. And on the back of it says, Toorock, Dartmouth football. And I thought, well, my daughter's got hooked. I did too. It was really something. So we've developed this relationship. We see each other a lot. And then, winter before last, he was killed riding a bicycle in Florida. And it's sort of interesting to me, anyway, that that's the way he was killed, riding a bike, because he drove a bike from San Diego to Boston to raise money for his brother who had cancer. And Buddy was just an unbelievable individual, always positive. He remembered, he was more than a football coach, because he had his kids, they had to know each other. When they started class, they had to sit in the front row, introduce themselves to the teachers. I mean, an interesting thing happened one game after he had died. They held a candlelight ceremony on the campus right in the middle. They gave out candles to everybody, and different people spoke. And at the end, the woman that ran it said, "Turn to your right or turn to your left and introduce yourself," because that's something Buddy always did. I turned to my right, and who's standing there? One of Buddy's brothers. And it's very sad. They had a celebration of his life about 2 months ago, and 1,500 people showed up for that celebration. They came from all over the world, Dartmouth grads that are working or living in a foreign country. So the first home game against the Penn, they're going to dedicate the stadium to him. They're going to call it the Buddy Stevens Field at Memorial Stadium. And he has affected my life quite a bit. I try and be like him. I can't do it all the time. Probably can't do it half the time.
But it's a wonderful example and reminder that of the power of a positive person.
Oh, God, yes.
So I know that you have positively impacted your communities, and we seek to share some of that story and that energy out to others.
I'd just like to add one thing about him. Playing Brown for the Ivy League championship, and I'm down by where they come out with my grandchildren. Actually, was one of them. And he comes out, we hug, and instead of going out, he starts talking to my grandchild. And I didn't know that he knew that 4 of his defensive players, starters, couldn't play because they had COVID. And that he always had time for everybody. So he has affected me greatly.
Oh, cool. I think we're approaching our time. I want to say thank you for coming in and sharing some of your story. Thanks for ending on a high note with Buddy T. And thanks for what you do, with the Veterans Advisory Board, the Legion, the VFW, the Quilts of Valor, the flag disposal ceremonies. There's tons of things that you assist with. Thank you for that. Thank you for being an example.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Let me wrap up to the rest of the crowd. So as we wrap up, I'd like to remind our audience that our Veteran Service Officer, Jeff Farrell, maintains an office on the first floor of the Town Hall, and whose contact information can be seen on the screen at the end of today's show. Both he and the Veterans Advisory Board are here to help guide you to the resources and benefits that your uniformed service may have earned. We've got a couple things coming up, just like Andy said. On September 14th, there is a free breakfast over at the Senior Center. We would ask that you register so that we can ensure there's a proper amount of food. Outside of that, in the fall, we typically do a food and clothing drive through the schools. And then, of course, as Andy said, we're always trying to reach out to others. We welcome your participation, energy, comments, and suggestions. You can find us through Jeff and others. And then lastly, I just want to thank again the Westboro Television for their continued support in putting this Veterans Corner together, allowing us to come in and do it. And then, one big final shout out to Andy Toorock, Veteran of the Year from 2020, close friend, and fellow member of the board. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful week.